Community Initiative Compassion in Action Roundtable. I'm Jed Medifin. I'm the acting director of the Faith-Based and Community Initiative here in the White House. And take just a moment to look around you. You are in some of the very best of company, I would say. We're joined by some top researchers and academics, passionate social entrepreneurs, and compassionate government leaders. We've got people here who are community servants and also community heroes. And each month we gather here with an audience like this, top thinkers and doers, to explore innovative solutions to some of the great human needs of our day. These have ranged from malaria in Africa and global HIV/AIDS to addiction and homelessness and prisoner reentry here in the United States. And our goal is this. We have a deep hope that when we unite American compassion with American ingenuity, we really can bring new solutions to age-old problems. Our belief is that for every challenge being faced, for every great need there is, that it is being solved, even this very moment, by frontline faith-based organizations, frontline community groups, frontline social entrepreneurs who are bringing these creative elements to these challenges that have faced humankind since the very beginning. And of course, each of these issues carries a deep weight, but today I know carries a great burden for very many of us in this room. And it is this, the needs and challenges facing those newly arrived to America. Our title is Faith-Based and Community Solutions for Immigrant Assimilation and Success. And by assimilation, I want to be clear that we in no way mean the abandoning of the rich culture and heritage of the immigrants, that would be a loss not only to the individual, but also to the tapestry of America. We mean the process of bringing together the very best of the immigrants' heritage and their unique offerings with the very best of the American tradition, with all its opportunities and responsibilities. So here's a question. Why do we look first to faith-based and other community nonprofits to be central actors and innovators in this work? Well, I'll give you just one reason. Because government can't pull your socks up. And let me explain what I mean by that. Very briefly, my own experience, not as an immigrant, but as a sojourner in a different part of the world in Bangladesh, traveling through some of the rice fields and was there for a month and a half. And I remember a day when I got very sick and was actually very sick for several weeks. And I remember I was going across the rice paddies in a rickshaw with the man that was there named Shwapan. He didn't speak much English and I didn't speak much Bengali. But he insisted on taking me to his own home. And he brought me into his home, which was just a mud hut. And instead of putting me on the floor where they often slept, he put me on their table. And he set blankets on the kitchen table there so that I wouldn't be lying on the ground. And we got out my mosquito net. And I was just at that point almost in and out of consciousness. And he helped set up the mosquito net above me. And through the night, I was kind of in and out of sleep and I think semi-conscious. But every time I woke up, I would look, and Shwapan was sitting there on the edge of the bed. And I could hear him quietly praying for me, actually. And the mosquito net, as you can tell, I'm kind of long and lanky, and the mosquito net was not up to size. And so whenever I'd turn over, roll over, my feet would poke out from under the mosquito net. And Shwapan would lean over, and he would pull my socks up to make sure that the mosquitoes couldn't get my ankles either. And it's that kind of love, that kind of touch, that kind of very close human companionship that government alone cannot provide. The Faith-Based and Community Initiative was created with that vision in mind, knowing that government has a vital role to play in addressing human need, affirming that, and recognizing that it has great resources and a reach and convening power that almost nothing else can match. But when we're talking about the deepest human needs, we recognize that government also has weaknesses. Government can continue to do the same things over and over and over again when everyone on the ground knows that they're not working. It can sometimes be cold and distant and bureaucratic. It can be very removed from the issues that it's trying to address. And government can't love. And for that, we need to turn to these frontline organizations that share the same street corners as the challenges that they address, that draw upon scores of dedicated volunteers, that draw upon people that have a personal passion for the needs they're addressing. That is what the Faith-Based and Community Initiative is about, bringing together the strengths that government does have with a touch that only the human being, that only the neighbor-serving neighbor can bring to a problem, and that together we can be more effective at solving the great needs of our day. And this vision is something that we're very, very hopeful and confident that it is beginning to transform the way that the federal government addresses need. And a few examples, just very briefly, we see this in prisoner reentry. So the President's Prisoner Reentry Initiative, rather than creating one large bureaucratic model, is working through small nonprofits all over the country to provide a community and mentors and job training to people coming out of prison. And those who participate in it return to prison at rates less than 1/3 the national average. The same approach is there for addiction with the President's Access to Recovery program. Instead of one single big government office that offers a certain clinical service, an individual that's seeking to overcome addiction through the Access to Recovery vouchers can choose among dozens, even hundreds, of small nonprofits that provide not only clinical services, but also the fundamental supports and love that it takes often to overcome that addiction. And we see this vision as well over on the far sides of the sea with the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. More than 87% of PEPFAR's partners are frontline community and faith-based nonprofits that, again, bring a touch that complements that of large government to address the needs of orphans and vulnerable children and those afflicted by AIDS. So that's what we're talking about today, is bringing these solutions, these creative, community-based, innovative solutions that are coming up from the ground and pairing those with the things that government has and can do decently well. Well, let me finish with one other story. A few years ago, President Bush met a young man named Elijah. When he was a little boy, Elijah's village was bombed during Sudan's civil war. He lost both his parents, and he spent years wandering from one refugee camp to another. Eventually, Elijah resettled in Virginia, thanks to a partnership between a faith-based group and the State Department. And once he arrived, a local Catholic charity supported him as he got on his feet, enrolled in school, and began to build a new life and a new community. They didn't just offer services, they offered to help him with the physical things, but also welcomed him as a friend, even as a family, he would say. A few months ago, our office hosted a national conference here in Washington, D.C., and Elijah was there. And the president, I can just tell you, he was glowing when he asked Elijah to stand up and announced that Elijah had graduated from college. And I think the president's smile was every bit as big as Elijah's when the president said these words. He said, "The boy who grew up without electricity or running water is now a mechanical engineer." And in response to the roaring crowd, the president said, "You applaud for a good man named Elijah, but also for those kind souls who share in the great story of this good man." And so that's what we're going to be exploring more today, the promise of America, the hope, also the challenges, the very real deep struggles that often face those newly arrived here, but a confidence that those things can be overcome, not only with help and a hand, but also the love that only frontline groups like yours can provide. Well, to start us off, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Alfonso Aguilar. Alfonso is the chief of the U.S. Office of Citizenship. He also leads the Task Force on New Americans. And I can just say that our office has just appreciated so much the task force. They have been tremendous in this process, and it's been very clear that the reputation that Alfonso has, not only as an effective leader and an innovator in government, but also as someone who cares deeply about this issue, we saw it every step along the way. And so please welcome Alfonso Aguilar.
Well, good morning to everyone. Jed, thank you so much for those kind and generous words. I want to thank you and the staff of the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives for hosting this important forum on an extremely important issue. And on a special day. Today is Citizenship and Constitution Day. Today we begin Constitution Week in the United States. And when you think about it, some of the best citizens, some of the best Americans in history have been foreign-born Americans. And I think it's a great way to celebrate Citizenship and Constitution Day by talking about assimilation. And this is a major issue. What as a country should we do to help immigrants integrate into American civic culture? And the reality is that we're receiving immigrants in record numbers. This wave of immigrants that we're experiencing will become soon the largest wave of immigrants in our history. The Pew Research Center has projected by 2025, over 14% of the population will be foreign-born. That surpasses the peak of immigration during the Great Wave of Immigrants 100 years ago. By 2042, the census has just projected back in August that we will be a nation of immigrants. White Caucasians will be less than 50% in the country. And by 2050, 1 out of every 5 individuals in the United States will be foreign-born. These are incredible statistics. Obviously, there are many similarities with what happened 100 years ago, but there are also differences. Over 80% of the individuals we're receiving today come from non-European countries. They're coming from all over the world. And another factor that makes this wave different from 100 years ago are the settlement patterns. 100 years ago till the early 90s, immigrants were going to the major immigration hubs, cities like New York, LA, the major immigration states, 6, California, New York, Texas, Illinois, Florida, New Jersey. Now they're going everywhere, wherever they can find a job. There are 22 new gateway states where the growth of the immigrant population has been faster than in those 6 states. Places like Iowa, Colorado, North Carolina, Georgia. Many of you are actually working there with immigrants. And when you think about it, sometimes folks in those states haven't seen immigrants since immigrants settled those states 200 years ago. What makes it also very different from 100 years ago is that when it comes to assimilation, we tend to romanticize assimilation in the United States. We always think that it works, it has always worked. But we forget that at the peak of the great wave of immigrants 100 years ago, in the 1920s, Congress was influenced by restrictionist thinking, by people who wanted to limit immigration because of different reasons, different things that were happening in the world, the First World War, the Communist Revolution. So they began passing very restrictive laws, first in 1921, then in 1924. They passed the National Origins Act, which pretty much limited immigration. It closed the door on immigration. For 40 years, from 1924 to 1965, we basically had a moratorium, a de facto moratorium on immigration. And these laws were passed precisely to limit immigration, to ensure that immigrant groups remain minorities. This time around, we're not going to have a moratorium. We need immigrants. There's incredible demand for labor in our country. We need immigrants to come here to do jobs that Americans don't want, or simply to do jobs where there are no Americans of working age to be found. So that's not going to stop. And that's why we see these projections from the Census and the Pew Research Center. So while there are similarities to 100 years ago, there are also great differences that we have to keep in mind. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe immigrants today are integrating. Immigrants, foreign-born, eventually learn English. Naturalization rates are high. Home ownership is high. Over 80% of foreign-born in the country are working. Unemployment rate for foreign-born is low. Second generation, the children of immigrants, there's upward mobility. Higher education levels, over 80% of immigrants speak English fluently. So integration is happening. However, considering the numbers of immigrants that we're receiving, the diversity of countries where they're coming from, and the new settlement patterns, we, at this point, have to make sure that we strengthen assimilation efforts so this pattern of integration continues. Obviously, what we want to avoid is our country becoming a nation of enclaves where you have different ethnic groups throughout the country that don't interact with each other, that don't interact with the larger community. Clearly, it's not happening today, but it could happen if we don't strengthen efforts now. Just to assume that assimilation is going to happen automatically, I think it's very naive. I think we just need to strengthen efforts. And I'm optimistic that integration will continue. But I think we have to do it now and anticipate. 20, 30 years down the road may be too late, and then we could have serious issues. Just look at what's happening in Europe. Perhaps because they didn't pay attention to the immigrants that were arriving in terms of helping them integrate. They're having serious issues right now. And when you talk about immigration in Europe, you immediately have to talk about integration. And they're looking at us and saying, well, why it has worked in the United States? What can we do to help immigrants, mostly from the Middle East, integrate? So clearly, this is a very important issue. And let me tell you, we need immigrants. And as I've said, we have an incredible demand for workers. We need them to produce the goods and services that creates wealth in our country. You create wealth in a nation when you produce goods and services, and we need them to produce those goods and provide those services. That's what creates wealth. That's what keeps our economy going. But not only we need them because of economic reasons, they really, really contribute to our social life. As Jed said, they really contribute to the tapestry of America, strengthen our cultural fabric, and they bring so much to the country. So that's why the president has talked about assimilation and has called on the country to strengthen assimilation efforts. In fact, President Bush is the first president in 100 years since that great wave of immigrants to begin talking about assimilation. 100 years ago, we had an Americanization movement, and it was led by the federal government, not managed by the federal government, but it was led by the great presidents of the progressive era, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and it partnered with faith-based and community organizations, churches, service organizations. Many of the great service organizations we have today were creating during those times. You think of the Knights of Columbus, or the Catholic Church, that were created to help Italian and Irish immigrants settle in the country. We even had settlement houses. Even political machineries in New York, for example, Tammany Hall, were very interested in helping immigrants integrate and become citizens, for obvious reasons, right? But that's fine. We need to revive an Americanization movement for the 21st century. And again, this is fundamental to preserve our democracy. This is important to preserve the political and social cohesion of the country. And again, what we're talking here is not, like Jed said, about cultural assimilation. We're a great liberal democracy. In a liberal democracy, you have two spheres, the cultural and the political. Your culture, your traditions, your faith, that's up to the individual, and we have to respect that. But when it comes to the political, that's where we all come together. Politically, we're all American. So we're talking about political assimilation. We can still talk about the melting pot, actually, but it's a political melting pot. And President Bush has defined 3 elements that define that American political identity. First, English language. It's extremely important for immigrants to learn to speak English. Not because of ethnocentric reasons, it's just that in a democracy where you need to deliberate, when you need to come together to talk about the issues that affect the community, people need to communicate with each other. A political community, like any community, you're building relationships. To build a community, you need to build friendships. If you can't understand your neighbor, you can't talk to your neighbor, you're not going to be building a community. So learning English is extremely important. Second is common political principles. We want to make sure that immigrants learn and identify with the political principles that define our country. And honestly, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand America. Rule of law, separation of powers, inalienable rights, that in the United States, the government doesn't give you the rights. You're born with those rights. As the Declaration of Independence says, we're endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. It's the role of the government to guarantee those rights, but government doesn't give us those rights. And for many immigrants, it was an incredible thing 200 years ago when we announced our independence and we made that statement. But many immigrants are coming from countries that don't have that vision, that don't live by the rule of law, where rights are actually given by government to some and to others are not afforded. So in this country, everybody is recognized those rights just because of their dignity as human beings. Finally, history. A common sense of history is the history of the political community with the good and the bad. We see our forefathers and we identify with them not because they're similar to me ethnically or racially or religiously, but because they helped create this great country. History is something that's not static but continues to evolve, and an immigrant arriving here and becoming a citizen is now part of that history. It's the history of the family. I always say that when you marry into a family, you have to get to know the family of your spouse, right? So you get to know the mother-in-law, sometimes the crazy uncle, you know. But you know what? That's your family, right? And you have to make adjustments. It's the new family, but it's true. In America, it's the same thing. When a person sees U.S. history as their history, it's what I call the John Fonte test, is then they really feel American. It's that sense of belonging. And there are other important issues that you work on a daily basis with immigrants, from having access to health care or helping them get a job. All of those things are important. If a person can't get a job, if they can feed their family, that's going to be an obstacle to integration. But what we've been talking about, I think, it's the primary indicator of assimilation, which is hard to assess, and it's developing that sense of belonging, that sense that now I'm here. I may be from Vietnam, I may be from Mexico, but you know what? I'm here, I'm American, and this is my country. And that's what we have to work at. Again, we need to celebrate diversity, celebrate the different cultures and religions present in the United States, but we need to transcend it. We need to avoid the two extremes that we have in the country, the cultural extremes. On the right, you may have nativists, nationalists who will try to define American identity exclusively on Anglo-Protestant terms. America is more than that. Certainly, we recognize the great contributions of Anglo-Americans. On the other side, I think we have to, the other extreme, I think we have to avoid the vision of multiculturalism that promotes this vision that what defines you is your race or your ethnicity. Again, you can celebrate your culture, but politically in America, what defines us are our political principles that allow us to transcend our ethnic group. Doesn't mean that we don't celebrate it. I know I'm a son of immigrants. My mother's Italian and my father's from Costa Rica, and I grew up in San Juan, Puerto Rico. My son's born in Maryland. Grandchildren will probably be born in Alaska, I guess. That's a place to be nowadays. But you know, it is extremely important to value those traditions. They define you culturally or religiously, but as Americans, it's those political values. So we need to celebrate culture, but transcend it. And it's the political where we come together. Every time we get into a cultural discussion of what America means, we never reach agreement, and it's divisive. And I must say, this is one of the underlying issues that makes sometimes the immigration debate so contentious. What is America about? You know, are we changing the face of America? Well, you know, the face of America may be changing, demographics are changing, but our principles are there, are the same, and America is going to be the same. And like the president has said, by receiving immigrants, we're going to be more, not less, Americans. In fact, immigrants help us strengthen our democracy because they help us revalue those principles that so many of us take for granted. You know, we just released a naturalization exam, and what did the media do? They went out there to the streets. You had David Letterman and Jay Leno going out there to the street asking people questions for the naturalization exam. People could not answer them. And I wasn't concerned so much with the factual questions, but I was concerned when somebody was asked, what's the rule of law? What are inalienable rights? And they could not answer those questions. You know, democracy based on ideals, you have to master those ideals. So in a way, I think immigrants help us by arriving here, by sparking this discussion, to help us talk about what American identity is all about and revalue those principles. So what have we done? First of all, the president created the Office of Citizenship, which was created in the Homeland Security Act of 2002. I'm the first chief of the Office of Citizenship. We are a public education outreach office, and we help immigrants integrate. Now, let me say at the outset that our goal and our belief is that we should not create a multi-million-dollar entitlement program for assimilation. Because if we do, I can guarantee you the federal government is going to get it wrong. It's not going to work. Immigration, assimilation in the United States has worked bottom up. And that's why you are here, and that's why so many of you work with us. You know, and Jed was saying so well, you know, government, and the president has said it also, it's hard for government to love. You know, we can provide services, information, but it's really organizations at the community level, faith-based organizations that can provide that compassion and love that help immigrants feel comfortable in a country. Many times, those of you who work with Hispanic immigrants, with Latino immigrants, know that the point of entry is the church. And I was just recently in Orlando. We provided a training for the churches of God in the Orlando area. I'm glad to see Bishop Marcial here. And we went there. You know, it's very difficult sometimes for immigrants to go to a meeting where somebody from immigration is going to be there, right? But we held a meeting at the church. They felt so comfortable. We got so many questions. They got the message. It was a great event. Many times, that point of entry into the community is the church. So what we want to do is raise the level at the federal issue, use the bully pulpit of the federal government to talk about this issue, but develop resources, be training, technical assistance, educational material to empower you to do that work and facilitate the work, but not do the work, because you do it much better than the federal government or any government could ever do it. So the president signed the bill creating the Office of Citizenship. And then he created a task force for New Americans composed of different federal agencies. I'm the chair of the technical committee of that task force. And the goal of the task force is to coordinate policy regarding immigrant assimilation, and also to maximize the resources of the federal government to develop initiatives to help immigrants integrate. So what have we done? Through the Office of Citizenship and in partnership with the Task Force of New Americans, we've done several things. I think we put the building blocks in what we can say is the first national assimilation policy in perhaps 100 years. With a very small staff, but very passionate, very energetic, who travel all over the country, spending many hours in planes just to be with groups in the communities, meeting directly with immigrants, and with a small budget. But you don't need a huge budget to do this type of work. So first, we've developed a volunteer initiative that we call the New Americans Project. We partnered with USA Freedom Corps, you know, the White House Office for Volunteer Service. And this is a national campaign to encourage volunteer service. As I've said, one of the underlying issues that makes immigration so contentious sometimes is the lack of understanding between the immigrant community and the receiving community. Volunteer service is a great way, and you all know so many stories. When you match somebody from the community with an immigrant, without any mediators, then you promote understanding. So volunteer service can be a great way to bridge that gap between the immigrant community and the receiving community. Mentorship programs are very popular in the United Kingdom, in Canada, Australia, where they have host programs. Well, we have a national campaign. We're publishing public service ads all over the country with a very positive message, encouraging Americans to volunteer. We created a special search engine within volunteer.gov, or you can also go to the webpage of Freedom Corps under New Americans Project. And there's a search engine where you type in your zip code and you'll find volunteer opportunities specifically to work with immigrants in your community, from helping them learn English to helping them fill out their taxes, or perhaps it's just to meet with them, talk, take them to a movie, help them to get to know the community. We're also recognizing many volunteers, like we're going to do today with the President's Volunteer Service Award. I was just in Denver, and we recognized an individual who just in 2007 volunteered over 122 hours teaching English to immigrants. So this is very important, and we're taking it very seriously. We're also encouraging immigrants to volunteer as a great way to learn about the country, and also to show the community that they're arriving that they want to contribute. You know, one of the great things, I was blessed to participate of the papal mass here in Washington, and the Holy Father, Benedict XVI, said something to immigrants. He said it in Spanish. He said, you know, you should be happy to be in the United States. This is a welcoming country. But also, and this he said based on Scripture, give back for free what you've received for free. So immigrants, we want to be welcoming, but we also want them to participate. So volunteer is a great way to show the community that they want to contribute. So we're also publishing ads in Spanish and Chinese, and we have a search engine in Spanish to find volunteer opportunities, again, in partnership with USA Freedom Corps. Educational material. That's something that the federal government can do very well. We've developed educational materials for immigrants at different stages in their immigrant journey. We have a new guide for immigrants that's available in 13 different languages. None that we just want to provide information in different languages. We believe that when immigrants arrive, many don't speak English. So we should provide them information in their own language and encourage them in their own language in a friendly way to learn English. You know, it is our common language, but it shouldn't be ugly English-only approach. Learn English. No, we want to encourage them to learn English, but we go and provide information in their own language. That guide has information about life in the United States, housing, financial services, education. It's a great tool. You know, and now we're actually going to give to every single immigrant where they get their green card this guide. This is a very different way how we're doing immigration services. 5-10 years ago, when people get their green card, would get one of those bureaucratic letters from the old INS. Welcome to the United States. Here's your green card. Good luck. Well, now, at least we're saying, welcome to the United States. Here's a guide with basic information. We've also developed welcometousa.gov. It's the first federal website for immigrants that also provides basic information about life in America. Information also about small business and entrepreneurship. As you know, many immigrants arrive here and are very entrepreneurial. You can see it with the Hispanic community. 1 out of every 6 small businesses in the United States are Hispanic today, and many are owned by foreign-born individuals. In that website, we have another search engine where they can type in their zip code and find English classes in their community. You know, before they didn't know where to go. That's the type of information that we need to prepare. I know I'm running out of time, so I'll try to be as quick as I can. We developed the Civics and Citizenship Toolkit, and it has all of our educational material. Initially, we're just going to provide it to libraries, and this is a true story. The president did last year an event on assimilation at a church here in Washington, and he saw this, and he said, you know, this is great, but we need to provide it to community and faith-based organizations. And we did that. So far, you can go to citizenshiptoolkit.gov, register, all of you, and get a copy for free. And this is also sold by GPO for $50. So if you go to citizenshiptoolkit.gov, you'll get it for free. Provides a lot of good material. So this is a grant of educational material. So far, we've distributed over 13,000 toolkits all over the country. Oh, I'm down to 0. That's not good. Okay, we developed a new naturalization exam. The new naturalization exam is not a tool to filter people from citizenship. It's a tool to encourage civic learning and attachment to the country. The new exam follows a basic U.S. history and civics curriculum. Our goal is to encourage civic learning. If you study, you should pass and become a citizen. That's our theory. And in the pilot that we did, over 92% of people passed the new exam. It's just a better test. It's not a harder exam. Finally, we're providing training. Number of online training resources that we have available for educators and volunteers. And we are providing throughout the country training to organizations on how to teach civics, citizenship to immigrants. This year alone, we've provided over 2,000 educators and volunteers training all over the country, from Orlando to LA to Arkansas. We've traveled all over the country, and we're going to continue to do it. And then finally, this year we traveled all over the country because we believe we need to revive an Americanization movement for the 21st century. We held roundtable discussions, meeting with representatives of different sectors of American society to see how they can get involved. And based on those discussions, in the next few months, we're going to issue a report to the President of the United States on recommendations on how to strengthen assimilation efforts. We did a roundtable with faith-based organizations, and we had different groups from different creeds, and it went extremely well, so we're going to address that, and we'll let you know when that report comes out. This is just the building blocks of, as I said, a national integration policy. But we want to work with you to facilitate your work, to empower you, so you can provide good services and help immigrants settle in the country. And just to finish, Ronald Reagan said something that I think describes America perfectly well. He said in his last term, he received a letter from a constituent who said, Mr. President, I love the United States because if I'm American, I go to Italy, I go to Germany, I can live there for 20 years, I will never become fully Italian or German. He mentioned other countries, Turkey, Japan, whatever. But he said, Mr. President, what I love about the United States is that any person from any corner of the world can come here, take that oath of allegiance at a naturalization ceremony, and become fully American. That's a great story, and that's really what America's all about. I commend you for the incredible work that you're doing. You are the key, really, to assimilation, and we want to work with you, and we'll continue to work with you. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Tamar Jacoby. I'm president of Immigration Works USA. It's a nonprofit here in town, and I'm the moderator of the first panel. It's a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here today celebrating Constitution Day and talking about what I call the assimilation imperative, because it really is an imperative of our time. And Alfonso laid this out, but I think it's worth pondering once more. What's so complex about this is it is the challenge of our day, and I would argue of our era going forward, but it's a complicated challenge because we are succeeding in great measure. Today's immigrants are assimilating. In the second generation, 99.9% speak English. If they don't learn it at school, if their schools are failing them, they learn it at their faith-based organization, or they learn it on the streets, or they learn it from TV. The second generation is moving up, exceeding their parents' wildest dreams in terms of what they do. You've all seen the families where the father comes and mows the lawn, and then the son is the contractor who is running the contracting business. And they're proud patriots. Many of today's immigrants, and their children are proud patriots, deeply loyal, fighting and even dying for this country. So the future is not one, we're not heading for the former Yugoslavia, a Balkanized nation, and we're not heading for a permanent underclass, no matter what some of the naysayers on talk radio and talk TV would have you think. But the point is that even the success we're having today is not enough. And I always say, if you want to think of one set of numbers to think about the integration challenge or the assimilation challenge, is think about what the population is going to look like in 2050. In 2050, And the projections actually differ. At least 25, if not 30% of the American population is going to be Latino. Now, some come from families where the parents have PhDs and they're following in their parents' footsteps. But many come from families where the typical Mexican immigrant has a sixth or seventh grade education. So even if the children do twice as well as their parents, which of course is a challenge, that's not good enough. We can't be a nation where 25 to 30% of the population is just graduating from high school. We need a population of people who graduate from college and become PhDs. If we're going to remain the dynamic powerhouse world leader that we are today, we have to meet the assimilation challenge. I think of it as the Sputnik challenge of our era. And as Alfonso laid out so eloquently, and Jed as well, this is going to take all of us. The government alone can't do this. This can't be left to taxpayers and to a government program. That's why I'm so pleased to be introducing the panel that we're going to hear from today. So I'm going to start. I'm not going to introduce them all in a row and then let them speak. I'm going to speak as they come up. We're going to start with Sherry Crawford, who is the president of a program called Project Light. Sherry has a great resume. She's a corporate lawyer, and she's a faith-based nonprofit leader. So with that, I pass the podium to Sherry to let her tell you about what she's doing. And I'm going to be a ruthless timekeeper because we only have half an hour for our panel, so 5 minutes each, please.
Should I speak here, or do you want me to?
Whatever you're comfortable.
I'll do it from here, because I'm going to try to control the computer. I just want to thank, first of all, this administration for the honor of letting Project Light be part of this. I want to thank the White House Office of Faith and Community-Based Initiatives. I really appreciated your words, Jed, and also your words, Alfonso. I am amazed at what the government is doing to stand behind the faith-based community. So Project Light feels it is an honor to even be here today. I am a volunteer for Project Light, and my first experience with the assimilation process with immigrants occurred about 20 years ago when I was volunteered for an organization, not Project Light, another organization that assimilated El Salvadorian refugees into the United States for their U.S. citizenship. And I had a wonderful experience there. I was an assistant in teaching English as a second language, and later the students asked that I become the teacher. And I watched every day those immigrants that came to this country that were trying to learn about their U.S. citizenship, and they would work all day, and then at night they would come to class, and they would have to listen to me talk about different words in English. And I was just so blessed by that experience. Then I went on to become a lawyer and did some different things, but my heart was always there to come back and do a service. And so it happened that my father was the founder of Project Light. And what Project Light is, these two pictures are of students, one being tutored that was from South Africa, and another, the little girl, is at one of our learning centers down in Alabama. And really what Project Light is about, we develop software that teaches English as a second language, and we partner with faith-based organizations, churches, ministries, and missionaries, as well as community-based organizations, housing authorities. And we provide them with software and training to plant learning centers in communities in need. But the key to our program is not the software. I'll talk about the software a little bit and what a blessing that is, but it's the one-to-one relationships. And it's the and we really are a tool provider for the faith-based community, because the faith-based community is really doing the work of developing the one-to-one relationships, which are the key in teaching English, and then also the assimilation. So I'm not sure if I'll work this right here. Let's see. Is there a particular button I press? Oh, I'm doing it. Okay. Okay, well, I did it. I'm used to there we go. Sorry, guys. This really is about innovation and collaboration. Project Light, as I said, was established 29 years ago. And these are really partnerships that we entered into to get our software. So we have the U.S. Department of Education developed content, and then we were able to get that content from the public domain and turned it into software that is designed to take a non-reader up to the 5th grade level in 1 year. And then we also partner with a faith-based literacy organization called Christian Literacy Associates, and that's another part of our software that is interactive, and it teaches them the 40 most common words in the English language. And it also has those barriers broken. You see, and many of you that have tutored in English as a second language see it, but what I love about this program is it breaks the barriers. It breaks the social barriers, the economic barriers, the racial barriers, the ethnic barriers, and many of our learning centers go beyond teaching English as a second language. They provide clothes a lot of time, they provide food a lot of time. Not that it's part of their service ministry, but they just do it because the relationships are formed. You also see families from different cultures and backgrounds coming together, because once you get into that relationship and you're sitting there tutoring someone with interactive software and interactive questions, you can't help but form a relationship with that person. So that's really, the key to our program is the one-to-one. And whenever we train up churches and ministries, we say, we don't want you to use our program in a classroom setting. You can go to a school and get that. What we want is you to use the program, and we really mandate that in a one-to-one environment, a relationship-building environment. So this really just talks about different partnerships we've had to get our software to where it is. Our next innovation is getting our software over the internet so it can be used pretty quickly. So I'm not going to go into detail about that because that's really not as exciting about, more what's exciting is what our learning centers are doing. So we've established hundreds of learning centers. They're all over the United States and actually all over the world. We're in about 35 countries over the world. A lot of missionaries use our materials out in the field. And a lot of missionaries in the United States use our materials, and a lot of community-based organizations, as I've said. What we're seeing when my dad originally founded this, it was really to teach literacy and English as a second language, but in the beginning it was mostly literacy in the inner cities. What's happened is that's a complete shift. When I talked to our outreach director, he said now 52% of our centers are primarily focused on English as a second language, and it's growing. And so where that's growing is in Texas. Right now we have a learning center in Texas, and there's a fellow, Orby Brooks, who decided that he was placed on his heart to go and tutor. And he's teaching former Burma, but Myanmar students English as a second language. And he has an innovative approach. He uses our software, but he also uses a driver's license test to teach them English. So he has, and I love Alfonso to hear about that toolkit, because I want to get that in every one of our learning centers. I mean, that's exciting. So our learning centers, because we don't control them, they're all through churches or different organizations or different legal entities than us. They all have these innovative approaches. They'll use our software, but then they'll go out and find other kits, or they'll figure out ways to assimilate the individual. So I'm hearing my time is up. So if anybody really wants more information on the presentation, it's just really about how we've mobilized the faith-based community, not we, but through partnership with the faith-based community. And really, that picture is the key. That's it. It's about the one-to-one relationship. And it's about the software that allows you to interact in the one-to-one relationship. So if you want to hear more, I have lots of stuff. I have newsletters, I have CDs, DVDs. And if you want to learn more about the presentation, and just thank you very much for your time and letting me be here. It was a real blessing.
Thank you so much. It's a shame to have to cut these presentations short. This is the heart of the program, the wonderful work that you're all doing. Our next speaker is Mark Hetfield, who's the Senior Vice President for Policy and Programs at the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. You have people's biographies in your packet. I think I won't take time. Mark, I'm sure Mark would rather have the 60 seconds to speak. So there you go. 5 minutes, please.
Thanks. I'm here representing the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, or HIAS, where I started working in 1989 as a caseworker in Rome, working with the exodus of Jews from the Soviet Union to Israel and the United States. Today, a majority of the refugees resettled by HIAS are not Jewish. Whenever I speak to a group, Jewish or non-Jewish, liberal or conservative, I'm inevitably asked the question, why is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society resettling Christians from Burma and Iraq, Muslims from Africa and Afghanistan, Hindus from Bhutan, and Baha'i from Iran? They're not Hebrews. My response is always the same. They may not be Hebrews, but they are refugees, and the history of the Jewish people is a history of refugees. The Torah reminds us 36 times that we are to love the stranger as ourselves, for we were once strangers in the land of Egypt. HIAS is only fulfilling our Jewish values and our responsibilities to the country which welcomed us and our ancestors when they fled persecution. The White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, however, certainly understands why HIAS is resettling non-Hebrews. Of the 9 national refugee resettlement agencies, 6 are faith-based, just like HIAS. None of these agencies limit resettlement to members of their own faith, nor do any of them make any efforts to draw the refugees into their own faith. Rather, we all resettle refugees because we are united by the values and teachings on freeing the oppressed and welcoming the stranger. To build on Jed's remarks, though, I must remark and challenge one of the words used in framing today's discussion about effective assimilation strategies in local communities. In the Jewish community, assimilation is considered to be a very controversial and dirty word. To us, it implies a loss of one culture by being absorbed into another. Rather, the term which HIAS uses is integration, as we don't ask refugees to be absorbed into American culture, but to join it, to enrich it, and to participate in our democratic society. HIAS is particularly proud to be one of the U.S. government's partners in the refugee program because while other resettlement countries admit refugees only after evaluating their potential to integrate, the U.S. refugee program does not look at this as a criterion. Rather, we look at the refugee's need to escape persecution and to come to safety and freedom. As soon as the refugee lands in the United States, however, voluntary agencies like HIAS and our affiliates greet the refugee family at the airport and begin our partnership with the refugee and with the U.S. government in helping the family integrate into society. It's not just HIAS which resettles refugees for the American Jewish community, but we rely on our network's 33 Jewish communities and community organizations which join us in the front line of this endeavor. In partnership with the Department of State, Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, and the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement, or ORR, we welcome the refugees, find them housing, help them learn English. HIAS, like the other 8 national voluntary agencies, provides monitoring and technical support to affiliates, helps them share best practices with each other, and monitor their compliance with national reception standards. In terms of integration, the most heavily emphasized indicator is employment outcomes, where our success is measured, particularly by ORR and its matching grant program, looking at the percentage of refugees who become employed and self-sufficient within 90 and 180 days after arrival. The U.S. government and its partner agencies believe that while there are many elements to successful integration, chief among these is getting employed, establishing self-sufficiency, and paying taxes. Our resettlement affiliates, therefore, focus their efforts on providing the cultural and English language orientation necessary to become employed, and working with local employers to make self-sufficiency a reality. This is not just a question of economics. By promoting self-sufficiency and employment, we're reinstating the sense of dignity and independence which many refugees lost while becoming dependent on handouts in refugee camps. Civic integration is simply not possible without this sense of dignity. Successful integration, however, only begins with employment. Refugee families experience particularly difficult challenges adjusting to life in the United States. Now that they have arrived in their new country, traumas experienced in the country of persecution or in the refugee camp come to the surface. Some members of the family, particularly the younger ones, integrate faster into American culture than other family members, and traditional gender roles are often challenged in this process. If unaddressed, these issues can create conflict, cause family structures to disintegrate, and hinder the family's integration into his or her new homeland. Recognizing this, in 2003, ORR launched its Healthy Marriage Program, which has become very successful in teaching communication and conflict resolution skills to refugee families across the country as part of the integration process. At 12 local HIAS resettlement affiliates, we participate in this program. In the HIAS network, the program provides language and culturally specific training and funding to benefit refugees from the former Soviet Union, Sub-Saharan Africa, Burma, and Iran. Finally, as HIAS has resettled nearly 350,000 Russian-speaking refugees to the United States since 1980, we're in an especially good position to assist with the promotion of their full civic integration. This is a major challenge because, as you know, citizenship in the U.S. carries with it a very different set of duties and obligations than it did in the USSR. In partnership with ORR, HIAS established the LORIO program, which stands for the National Network of Local Russian Emigre Organizations. LORIO, through its 5 regional representatives, has helped local communities of refugees from the former Soviet Union develop 70 local community-based organizations to promote community empowerment, citizenship education, and civic participation, helping refugees advance toward United States citizenship. As a complementary effort of LORIO, HIAS has also established the Civic and Voter Education Initiative, or SVE, which provides bilingual trainings on exercising the right to vote and on other civic responsibilities. Particular emphasis in both of these endeavors is on working with the older members of the refugee population who receive their formal education outside of the United States, those who face the greatest challenge linguistically and culturally in fully engaging in civic participation. Through all of these programs, from the reception and placement program once the refugees walk off the plane, to the Civic and Voter Education Initiative when they exercise their right to vote for the first time, HIAS is grateful for its relationship with both the United States government and with the American Jewish community, welcoming and integrating strangers into our society so they can live up to their full potential and can help us live up to our full potential as a democratic country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, we knew we couldn't get through the program without a discussion of the term. I once held a conference like this on this topic, and I called it "You Say Tomato, I Say Tomato," because we can't agree on what to call it. Our next speaker is Chris Kohler, who's the director of ESL programs at St. James Cathedral in Seattle.
Good morning. St. James ESL program has provided English tutoring for 33 years. We also have held conversation groups, public speaking classes, ESL for blind and visually impaired refugees and immigrants, and a variety of other services. And for the past 11 years, we've provided or helped people to become citizens. The focus of our citizenship project has always been on immigrants who are isolated, elderly, homebound, or who otherwise cannot attend classes. For example, we helped 2 elderly Russian sisters whose poor health prevented them from attending classes on a regular basis. A totally different example was a young couple who had to stay at home to care for their terminally ill child. They all became citizens. In fact, we have a 99% success rate, which is to say that nearly every single one of our clients who walks in to take a naturalization exam comes out a citizen. Now, so what makes our citizenship program so successful? Well, it really comes down to 3 things. And the first is really the most important because it drives the other 2. And that is a focus on people, program capability, and partnerships. So the first is really the most important. We're committed to doing whatever it takes to help someone become a citizen. Our attitude is not, we provide this service and we'll help you, it's part of the menu of services you need and we'll help you, connect with the other services. Our attitude is, for everyone who walks into our door, what is it going to take to get you to your goal of becoming a citizen? And then we make sure that it happens. That's meant over the years that we've had to develop a lot of program capability. Really, I'm not just talking about capacity, but I'm talking about the ability to respond to unforeseen, because there are always unforeseen challenges. Every time somebody new walks through the door, they have a different set of needs and challenges and issues that they're facing. In fact, I could probably write a dissertation on the stuff we learned just by working with blind and visually impaired refugees and immigrants who talk about people who fall through the cracks in the system. But that really had to be based on, or built on, a really strong foundation of the basics. And for us, there are really 3 components to the basics, and that is well-trained volunteer tutors who have a deep commitment to the people they serve, quality instruction, which includes a curriculum, instructional support that's research-based and proven, and that includes English, civics, test preparation, mock interviews. And thirdly, knowledgeable and motivated staff. Our citizenship staff are naturalized citizens themselves. They speak 5 different languages. They all have personal experiences coming here as refugees and immigrants. They work with the communities, not that they are part of. So in addition to focus on individuals and internal program capability, we still wouldn't be successful without our partners. And that really includes family and friends, funders, and other service providers. And family and friends are very important because they provide a multitude of tasks like driving people to appointments or working with doctors, family doctors, to make sure they fill out disability waivers correctly. But we also have formal partnerships with libraries, multi-service agencies, mutual assistance associations, and legal aid groups, to name a few. They help with outreach and volunteer recruitment. Libraries in particular find volunteers, provide facilities, and are there to help people access, they're there right on hand to help people access the information they need. We match people individually, and our citizenship staff are bilingual and bicultural, which I can't tell you how important that is in making things go smoothly, quickly, and efficiently. But in order to be successful, and no matter how well we do our job or how much we do, we really can't be successful without our partners. And given the incredible numbers of people who are waiting, the key challenge that we're facing is not success in working with individuals, but in bringing a successful system, and we're very much part of the adult-based education system, bringing a successful system up to capacity, really bringing it to scale. So to sum up, we work with the hardest to serve people who have persistent and multiple barriers. But we're successful because our goal is not to provide a service, but to get someone their citizenship. And we seek to continually improve what we do, and because we work closely with whoever we need to work with, from housing to public services, to help people naturalize and more fully participate in society. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our final speaker is Robert Panactera, who's the founder and executive director of Liberty's Promise.
Thank you, Mr. Jacoby. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Aguilar for thinking of us today, inviting us here, and the Office of Faith-Based Community Initiatives for having us today. I have one of the world's greatest jobs, ladies and gentlemen. I might have the world's greatest job. There's our pamphlet here in your packets. Basically, I get to show young people how great this republic is. That's what I do for a living. And I think that's a really cool job. I show young people from 60 different countries, from the DC metro area who live here, all about community, what American community life is all about, why it's important, and why they should participate in it. We have so many great stories about our youth to tell you, and some of the drier list of what we do in programs you can see in some of the literature. But we work with young people who basically are lacking in self-esteem, and the adolescents. They're 15 to 21. Now, first of all, they're adolescents. Okay, a lot of them have come to this country not knowing the language or having a poor grasp of the language, and most importantly, they don't know how the American system works. And their parents can't help them because their parents often were both immigrants who are working 2 or 3 jobs to hold a roof over the family's head. They don't know what it takes to have the child go to college or to succeed in school or to get a good job because they're just trying to make ends meet. So what we try to do is to show young people what community is all about and who's in that community. And so we take them out into the community through what we call civics classes, which is a dull way of saying what I did as a Cub Scout. Basically take them to the police department and introduce them to police officers and have them realize that the policeman is here to serve you. He's here to help you. He's here to make sure that law is obeyed and everybody follows the same rules. And a lot of these young people come from countries where the police are there to be feared, because they're there to beat you up and take your money, or take your money and then beat you up. This is a different sort of system that we live in here. If the policeman beats you up in this country, there's a free press that you can go to and talk to and tell them the policeman beat me up for no reason. And all these things that we take for granted, and what Ms. Aguilar was saying earlier about all the things we take for granted, we tend to we show these young people so that they can feel like they fit in. And again, the self-esteem issue is there because a lot of these youth, they feel as though, I can't do this. I don't know how the system works. I can't move forward. My English isn't good enough. Now, being a native Rhode Islander, most of them speak better English than I do. My grades aren't good enough. That's for white people, that opportunity, okay? What we basically do is show them, no, if you have the grades, your English, again, is better than mine, you can do this. You can succeed. We bring in people like you, who, by the way, you are the Republic. And it's because of you that the Republic stands. We bring in people like you to talk to these youth and say, hey, when I came to this country 30 years ago, I had $20 on my shoe, and now I own 5 restaurants. And, I can dress up like this all day long and preach to these kids, but, when I have a Salvadoran come in and talk to a Salvadoran youth about being a police officer, when I have a Bolivian come in, or an Eritrean lawyer come in and talk to Eritrean youth about being a lawyer, well, that's a different ball of wax, and that really makes a big impact. And so people like you help us do our job, which is show the next generation of Americans what this country's all about, and why it's a great country, and why they should participate in it. And talking about volunteerism, a lot of our youth, they want to volunteer and they want to give back, and again, they don't know where, and they don't know how. And so when we introduce them to volunteer opportunities, they're so grateful for it, and they're so good at it, because now they feel like they can give back to a system that gave them services and helped them move forward. And so we're all about community, and we're all about teaching young people about America and about American civic life. We feel like this is a program that can be replicated nationwide. We're 3 years old. We've served 348 youth in 3 years. Actually, my program officer, Sarah, served the 348 youth, and I deal with answer the phones. But, this is a program that can be replicated nationwide to show youth around the country what America's all about, because every community has its own story, and every community has a group of immigrants who want to get involved and want to live here and want to be good Americans, and we're helping them do that. Thank you for your time.
Well, it's so moving to hear the stories of the good work that you all are doing. We're behind schedule, but why don't we take 5 minutes for questions? I'm sure people have questions. No one has any questions?
I'll take a step.
Sure, please.
I'm Brett. I'm at the Peace Committee University. The theme of story narrative is strong. What stories and narratives might you have where it's not just the one-on-one volunteering of receiving communities coming out, where stories of successful integration take place where, confusing myself. I'm interested in stories that you can tell, or strategies or projects that I could connect to, where communities who are receiving immigrants can learn more about how to deal with change, how receiving communities can do better at integrating the idea that we're changing, we're becoming different. There's a lot of weight appreciably on helping immigrants integrate, but how can we in receiving communities deal with that fundamental dilemma and the rich opportunity to be different?
Well, Sherry, do you want to take a crack at that? Because your one-on-one sounds...
It's a very good question. What I would say is the way for the community to deal with it is the community to partner with organizations that are assimilating the immigrants. Because the community, if they want to understand the issues of their changing community, they need to be in those relationships with the people that are assimilating. That's what has been the solution that's happened in many, many, many of the communities that our learning centers have served, is the community has been built, and the people that are receiving in the change in their community have better understood the change and appreciated the change because they have the relationships that they built. So I would say have those folks volunteer in the organizations that are serving the immigrant population.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for all of you. My name is Jose Nino, the Hispanic Alliance for Prosperity. What percentage of people you serve that are immigrants in this country, and what percentage are you serving that are migrants? Understanding that immigration is legal, migration is illegal.
I bet they don't ask, but we'll find out.
Honestly, we serve whoever walks in the door. So the reason they come, we don't know the percentages, because if we start asking those questions, they may not come. That's with our learning centers.
We have two programs. One is an internship program. The internship program, you have to be documented because you have to be able to work in the United States for us to put them in an internship. In our citizenship program, our civics program, we don't ask. They go through the public school system. Anyone who can be in our program, so we don't know the percentages either because we don't ask.
Yeah, that's really the same for us as well. They start asking those questions and people stop coming.
Yeah, we serve refugees, who of course are legal entrants, immigrants, and then we also serve asylum seekers who may not enter through legitimate means, but who have a right to claim asylum in this country.
I think there's a question in the back.
In the area of English as a second language and civics instruction, what has been your experience in receiving federal financial support for your programs? And as a follow-up, what can the federal government do to enhance your efforts that they're not doing right now?
Since I've been at Project Light, which has been about 4 years, I am not familiar with federal programs that really fund these efforts. I know a lot of our learning centers, because they are funded by churches, they really have to get their dollars through granting agencies. We get our dollars through private donors and granting agencies. So I really don't, if there was a program where the federal government could help with these centers, because a lot of these centers, they die off because they don't have the funding. So we'll plant 500 centers, we'll be able to sustain about 200 centers. So if there was any federal program where the organization, whether it's community or faith-based organization, knows when they're servicing a student that's coming through and they could get some payment for that, that would be wonderful, because we lose a lot of them because they have to be the volunteers and they have to go work other places. So.
That's been our experience too.
Yeah.
So we get federal EL civics funding passed through the state, which is really very useful in terms of, well, most of it we think of as civics funding, not particularly citizenship. But then we get funding, a small amount of federal funding passed through the city of Seattle, specifically to help people naturalize. But the overall percentage of the federal funding is for citizenship, for naturalization, is fairly low. I just wanted to respond to the issue of community. How to help communities to change. I think, when we talk about, we serve King County, not just Seattle, and we don't think about how do we help King County, right? We think about what are the communities. So as a cathedral, one of our communities is parishioners. And so we do very specific things where we try to bring people together, and I think that's really the key thing. Because once there's a human face to it, and it's very much about seeing Christ in everybody. But once we bring people together, most people, their assumptions, their preconceived notions really dissipate fairly quickly.
I hate to cut this off because the deeper we go, the more interesting it gets. But unfortunately, my job is to be the gatekeeper. Thank you all so much, our panelists, not just for being here, but for the really important work you do.
Morning, everybody. It is my pleasure as a senior federal career executive to stand before you and talk about the issues of immigration and refugees and how they can assimilate and integrate into the society. For me, it's a pleasure because 100 years ago, my grandparents came here, and I'm an example of just a couple of generations of assimilation, and here I am standing before people who are no different than I am. And that is just an unbelievable pleasure and joy. What's wonderful also about America is that we dwarf in the numbers of refugees we accept into this country. Over the 30 years of the refugee resettlement program, which began in the late 70s, about 2.7 million refugees have entered this country. No other country in the entire world comes close. This year, and we're not quite done with the end of the fiscal year, about 53,000 refugees have entered this country, and probably by the end of the fiscal year, which will be in another month, there'll be close to 60,000. The next closest country may receive and allow in 11,000. Believe it or not, in the entire world, there may be only a dozen countries that allow refugees in, and the United States is always first and foremost in that. And this year, along with Mark, I was in Geneva over the summer with the UNHCR. All the other countries in the world don't come up to anything close to the numbers that we will allow in when you combine them all. So that shows what the American people feel about allowing refugees into this country. What's also significant about the refugee program is its change. 30 years ago, refugees came really from three major groups. The end of the Vietnam War, clearly, Cuban Haitians leaving their turmoil, and with the breakup of the Soviet Union. But what's interesting is America, under its system of establishing where refugees come from, which is done by the President in negotiations with Congress and the Secretary of State, and we in ORR, and our VOLAG, of voluntary agencies, there's a great change in the demographics of who comes into America. Now people are coming who are Karen from Burma, people from Burundi, people from Bhutan who were in Nepal, folks from Iraq. And what's clear about that is Americans are willing to accept those people, and the Office of Refugee Resettlement has been flexible enough with the funding we get so we can help new people who have new needs to become fully integrated and assimilated into America. What's also unique about ORR, and if you read my bio, you'll see I've been around for about 4 decades in federal and state government. Luckily, my parents had good genes, so I look young. And I'm not standing behind a mirror to show you my bald spot. ORR tries to be quick on its feet, again, with the help of every administration and Congress, to develop new programs based on who is coming into America. Today, we have lots of refugees coming into America who come from rural backgrounds. So we have a lot of rural programs. Just the other week, I was at some programs we fund in San Diego where we're helping farmers farm. So not only can they feed their families, but they can work with communities to sell their farm goods. We have people who are not only not able to read English, we have people coming into this country who are not literate in their own language. So we have to work with them. And a lot of our funding, top-notch, is to provide literacy training because that's a first barrier to employment. So what's important also about ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, is that we work in tandem with the State Department, and we work in tandem with all of the voluntary agencies that Mark sort of chatted about. Most of them, from the get-go 30 years ago, were faith-based organizations. Lutheran Services, Catholic Charities, HIAS, and others. So that showed that even 30 years ago, 3 decades ago, the federal government knew that it needed to work beyond itself and state government to reach out to refugees. And with all of that said, it's really to begin our conversations with 3 people who represent at the local level and at the national level, but not the government level, how we reach out to help refugees. We're lucky to have put together a group representing community-based secular organizations from Tucson, Arizona, Portland, Maine, and Lutheran services. So you'll get a wide range of perspectives from different voices and different ideas. We do have limited time, so I'm not going to sit here and read their bios. You have them with you. These are all top-notch people who've worked closely with ORR and closely with all of the refugees who enter this country with unique ideas. We have Barbara Eisworth, who is the director of Kashita Refugee Harvesting from Arizona, Jennifer Sprazinski from Smart Start in Portland, Maine, and Ralston Deffenbaugh, and he'll tell you what he really likes to be called, but I have to read the bio, from Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. And they each just have a few minutes. And again, what we also hope is that we can have some time for questions and answers, because it's usually in questions and answers where instead of us talking to you, you ask us. So with that, let me start by introducing Barbara.
The film should run. I'm just going to show a short video, 2 minutes plus, that was awarded the Portraits and Compassion honorable mention in the conference by this office, and it's a pleasure to be here.
We all work together to be our best in America. Thank you, thank you.
My name's Barbara Eisworth. I'm the founder and coordinator for Ishkashita Refugee Harvesting Network. Ishkashita means working cooperatively together in Mai, one of the main languages of the Somali Bantu refugees. After returning from Malawi, where I did my dissertation work, and seeing people that experienced a hunger period every year, or practically every year, I decided that I needed to do something about the food that was going to waste in Tucson. Thousands of beautiful fresh fruits, navel oranges, were falling on the ground, and connecting the people that could use these fruits, such as Somali Bantu refugees, and the people that have excess fruits has been the first aim in helping refugees here, and that's where Ishkashita Refugee Harvesting Network grew out of.
When we initially see these refugees, a lot of them are malnourished. They have not had a balanced meal. So I feel that your organization is really going out of its way to help in doing the harvesting of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds and involving them to harvest. So they feel part of it, so they don't feel that they're given handout.
It was quickly identified that refugees needed a lot more than just fresh fruit. So from there, we've started to help in whatever areas necessary. The collecting of clothes donations, hangers, furniture, all types of donations.
H-I-J.
The volunteers have stepped up to the plate to do tutoring.
OPQRSTUVWXYZ.
Barbara has opened up and offered the members of our church all these opportunities to be involved in whatever level they can.
Somali Bantu all America. Welcome. Thank you.
a pleasure to be here. Ishkashita. Oops. Okay, you'll see it in a second. I don't want to hold things up. Ishkashita empowers refugees by creating opportunities to use their knowledge and skills from their homelands and to facilitate their integration and acculturation into American life. I avoided the word with acculturation. Such as agriculture, harvesting, cooking, tailoring, beading, and weaving. Ishkashita partners with civic groups and many different faith-based organizations to aid in this refugee acculturation. Like the other programs that we've seen today, we aid refugee families by teaching American lives, by creating friendships through this harvesting and other activities, teaching English and literacy, learning the very complex system that we live in. One of the creative programs began with the harvesting. Ishkashita is a network made up of refugees and volunteers that harvest excess fruits to the tune of over 30,000 pounds each year. The majority of the fruit goes back to the refugee homes, over 90%, through creative redistribution channels, ESL classes, school programs, the volunteer agencies. Some is sold and used to train refugees at farmers markets and festivals, which is a great place for more interaction and education on both sides, building bridges between the American people and the many different cultures from which our refugees come. Some of the fruit is sold locally at restaurants and stores, another mode of education about local foods, about our local refugees. In addition, we make jams and juices. Last year, we even made olive oil. It's a very hard process and worth every drop. We provide the tools for the refugees to do some of this food processing in their homes. Is this replicable? Why, yes. With the help of a geographic information system that you see here, and presently United Way is helping us develop a system so any person with access to the internet can assist in mapping these local food resources. That is, recording each fruit tree down on a map like this. As you see, in this neighborhood, we have everything from amaranth to pomegranates mapped. And of course, Arizona is known for its many tons of citrus, and literally there are tons that we harvest each year. But every city in America has Halloween, and this is a program that can be developed in any city in the United States where vegetables are going to waste, where there's a pumpkin field at the end of October, the beginning of November, filled with squash and pumpkins. This is one of the ways that we teach about food preservation through freezing and canning, and make products to sell, such as pumpkin bread and seasoned pumpkin seeds. Beyond the harvesting, we have other creative ways where we're uniting community through the Tucson Refugees Yahoo group, which is a listserv of over 240 community partners, individuals, and organizations that are involved with the refugee community. This allows us a central location that we can store and access information, including educational presentations and how-to documents, step-by-step explanations of our many complex systems that are required to navigate our society, making our efforts in Tucson more sustainable. And that's kind of a virtual network. We also have Refugee Immigrant Service Provider Network, which is a gathering each month of the individuals that are involved, mainstream services, as well as volunteers that work with the refugees. In these ways, Ishkashita is erasing some of those lines, dismantling walls between our community members, and overcoming the divisions that exist between being successful and productive American citizens. And I can save the questions last. Of course, many newcomers arrive with a multitude of questions, but community and faith-based organizations can help pave the way through innovative programs, education, and open channels of communication, allowing new citizens to be born. Thank you.
Next, we have Jennifer. I'll just have one comment. Before you see somebody in clearly a suit and a nice tie, the greatest thing about my job is taking the tie off and visiting our sites. And just last week, thinking of the gleaning that they're doing, I had the joy of rolling up my sleeves and making pizza with a number of Somali women and their daughters so they could learn about American food. So with that, let me introduce Jennifer, please.
Great, good morning. I understand we have a slight technical difficulty, so there were going to be beautiful pictures here with really proud people in front of their businesses, and you need to imagine that while I'm talking. Okay. My name's Jennifer, and I am the director of Start Smart at CEI. CEI is a community development corporation and a community development financial institution based in Maine. And it was formed with, its roots are in the civil rights movement. We just celebrated our 30th year. And the focus is on economic self-sufficiency. We do this through commercial lending, business counseling, workforce development, and many other things. And you can see in the program, I think there's a better description. But I'm here to talk to you about one of those programs, Start Smart. Start Smart is free business counseling for new Americans living in Maine. And we sometimes get that response when I say Maine. We work in Portland and Lewiston. We've worked with people from 74 different countries. And the majority of our client base is Somali, Sudanese, Iranian, and Congolese. And one of the things I see with this work is a way for people to restore dignity to someone who most likely has been stripped of it. 2/3 of our business owners owned a business in their home country. They didn't clean hotel rooms or sell fast food. So business ownership is a way for them to integrate into the community, create value, and feel valued in their new home. And our work is funded through ORR, thank you, and also the Small Business Administration and private foundations. So I'm just going to spend a quick moment talking about 3 things that we do, that I feel we do well, that if you're thinking about doing this program, you could do as well. And I'm just going to highlight them. And then I wanted to end with a story that I think illustrates the points. The first thing is the style and delivery of our services. Our work focuses on an outcome of starting a business. And the goal is self-sufficiency for these, our clients. So the program's designed to get a client to start a business. It's not designed to get a bunch of business plans written or to count how many people go through training or whatever. It's start the business and then become self-sufficient. And the way we do this is one-on-one meetings. We entirely work one-on-one or one-on-two if it's a partnership. If someone calls us, they can get into our office usually within 3 days, if not earlier. And what we do is very customer-driven. We address the questions that the client brings to us. And these 2 things are really the basic tenets of how adults learn, timely and appropriate information. So we don't tell someone, great, you want to start a business. You need to wait until the next orientation, which is 3 months down the road, and class then starts in a week. You can get in and you can get through the process. It might take a while once you're meeting with us, but you're at least meeting with us and learning the steps. The second thing that we do, I guess, is the ability to do this type of work. And so the cultural competency with our staff goes without saying. If you're going to be working with, this group, you really need to have that. But you also need to have very solid business skills. And so you need to hire people with those skills. Ours have degrees in business and master's degrees, et cetera. And then we also have an organizational capacity. We've been doing this type of work for 30 years. We have systems in place for lending. We have loan officers that came from banks, et cetera. Our third piece, as I've mentioned, we have an established in-house loan department, which really helps our clients because none of them would get a loan from a bank. But what we discovered was our Muslim clients were not taking out loans because they were interest-bearing loans, which their religion prohibits. So the results, they were not opening businesses and they were not becoming self-sufficient. So the majority of our customers are Muslim, so we created a commercial loan product that meets the needs of this population. We call it Sharia compliant. This way, again, with very generous support from ORR, we've offered a mechanism for self-sufficiency for those clients. I do like to say, neither loan product is a better deal financially, just different in its underwriting. And we are the first Muslim lender in Maine. And one thing is we now have banks and the State Economic Development Department calling us to see how they might get in on this, which we find pretty neat. And I just want to close with a story that illustrates this work. So Asma is a woman. She came to Maine as a refugee, and she's worked with Start Smart since 2001. She spent the first 3 years with us planning, saving money, and searching for a location to open her restaurant. During that time, she continued her ESL classes, worked a full-time job, and she had a baby, and she became a U.S. citizen. She was able to start the business with loan and counseling assistance from Start Smart. We worked on permitting and zoning, city inspections, menu design, liquor licensing, sales tax, property tax, budgeting, pricing, cash register programming, bookkeeping, signage, marketing, proper food storage, customer service, employee issues, food sourcing, negotiating her lease, and many more things. She has just celebrated her 4th year in business, and this is the restaurant business, mind you, and has steadily increased her sales. She now makes more money than her husband, who has worked at the same job for 15 years. Last year, they purchased a home, and she was able to sponsor her oldest son, who was still in a refugee camp, come and live with them. So when I ask her about her motivation of doing business, one of the biggest reasons she gives me is that she can work it around her adult education classes, something that she wasn't able to do in her previous job. She's taken at least 1 class per semester while running a full-time restaurant, raising 3, now 4 kids, and her example is rubbing off on her children. Her second son received an athletic scholarship to attend the University of Maine, just started this month, and her 2 youngest are in private school in town, which offers scholarships based on both need but also diversity, and this is Maine. So she took what some might see as an adverse situation, which is being Black, African, and in Maine, and she created an opportunity for her family. Thank you.
And Ralston will talk a little bit in a different level because he's both representing a large VOLAG who has affiliates. Just let me throw in one thing about, I've visited Portland and talked to people, and there's lots of storefronts that are filled with Somali businesses. And people would talk about it, and the question I would always ask when somebody sort of said, oh, and I said, what was there before the Somali business? And the answer was, it was empty. So these businesses that these refugees are starting, whether it's in Portland or anywhere, are often filling up a downtown that was dying. And the refugees may have started working within their community, so the restaurant was for those of the community, but over time, American citizens said, that's good food, and they started eating there. So those are another sort of stories one can broaden. And with that, please.
Thanks very much. It's really a privilege to be here today to celebrate this marvelous public-private partnership, which is the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program. Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service is the national agency of the U.S. Lutheran churches. Our mission is, in response to God's love in Christ, we welcome the stranger, bringing new hope and new life through ministries of service and justice. We've been around since 1939, and we work through partners, our government partners, our partners in other voluntary agencies, others around the country, but a particularly strong partnership for us is with the Lutheran social ministry organizations around the United States. And one of the little-known facts is that if you add up all of the economic value of the activity of the Lutheran social ministry organizations, it's the largest private social service delivery system in the United States. In the refugee program, the public-private partnership dates from 1975 with the fall of Saigon and the very courageous decision that was taken by President Ford to welcome in those people on whose side we had fought in Southeast Asia. And that was very unpopular at the time. People forget that now. But part of the brilliance of President Ford's decision in starting the refugee resettlement program in its current shape was to say that people would not be so keen about welcoming newcomers, strange people in, if it was the government knocking on the door, but rather let's do that through friends and neighbors and congregations and groups that represent a cross-section of American society. And so my organization, Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, Marks, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, the Catholics, the Church World Service, other faith-based groups, as well as some non-sectarian groups, responded to that call. And since then, we've had this public-private partnership in refugee resettlement. The partnership and the scheme for refugee resettlement was then defined in the Refugee Act of 1980, and the roles of the various government departments and the non-governmental partners were then defined there as well. How do we then support, through LIRS, how do we support new beginnings for refugees? Well, the very first thing, and I think perhaps the most important, is extending that hand of welcome. And I can't underline how important that is. I think of the story of Dubravka. Dubravka is a woman from Bosnia who was resettled through our affiliate in Central Florida. And she arrived at the airport in West Palm Beach. There was a former board member of ours, John Fairking, receiving her, and he said, we're so happy you're here, you're welcome. At which point she burst into tears. And he said, well, why are you crying? And she said, I had to leave my home, my family, everything I knew. I've been bounced around from one country to another. I never thought I would be welcome anywhere. That's what we do. We extend that hand of friendship, and that hand of friendship is important not only at the time of welcome, but through the process of integration of people getting used to being in a very strange place, in a strange language, with strange people, wondering, do these people like me? Do they want me here? And you can't imagine how marvelous it is to have that hand of welcome extended to you of people who say, well, how are you? How are you doing? We're glad you're here. We like you. And by the way, how are the kids? And so forth and so on. We also do a lot of more sort of professional services as well, and that's part of our involvement in resettlement, mobilizing services of housing, health, school, work, employment, language. And here the matching grant program of the Office of Refugee Resettlement is a wonderful example of that public-private partnership where government resources are brought to bear, and then the special things that we in the nonprofit sector can bring to bear are there too, the volunteerism, the material assistance, and so forth. And through our Lutheran Church network, through the volunteers, the co-sponsors, the mentors, we're able to extend that partnership thousands and thousands of times over each year. From 1975 to 2007, the United States resettled 2,719,000 refugees. And this year, as David said, another 49,000 more will be resettled. So if you add that up, nearly 1 out of every 100 people in the United States is a former refugee. And what a tremendously successful program of integration this has been. Through this marvelous public-private partnership, people who had lost everything have found new hope and new life. Thanks.
And with any meeting, one has to be flexible. Sadly, we're going to move along, so we won't have a chance for questions just now. But I know all my panelists will respond to any questions you might have. And as I move off and they move off, just remember the person who carried the American flag at the Beijing Olympics was a former refugee. Thank you.
Well, a great panel, David. Thank you. Tremendous. Well, right now we have actually an award presentation. And what we've heard from these organizations that are on the front line serving is the innovation that has been driven by these creative social entrepreneurs and the unique ways they're solving problems. But I think what we all know is that innovation takes shape and is so often driven by the volunteers that fuel the organization. That this type of transformative service would not be possible without volunteerism. And volunteerism has been a very central part of President Bush's leadership agenda. Shortly after 9/11, actually, he issued a call to service to the nation, challenging Americans to become more civically engaged in volunteerism. And to lead that effort, he launched the USA Freedom Corps. And I could explain a lot about that, but they, at the heart of it, is trying to just draw more Americans into that wonderful, very distinctly American realm of volunteerism. And the individual who's leading that effort now is joining us. And Allison Young is a tremendous woman who leads USA Freedom Corps, and she will be presenting this volunteerism award.
Thanks, Jed. It's really an honor for me to be here today, particularly among some old friends and some new ones. USA Freedom Corps is proud of our partnership with the Task Force on New Americans and also with the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives to fulfill the President's promise to expand compassion initiatives across America. As Jed mentioned, USA Freedom Corps was born out of the tragedy that befell our country on September 11th. And the President called on everyone in the 2002 State of the Union to give 4,000 hours or 2 years in your lifetime in a call to service. And so today we're here to honor a couple of great volunteers who have answered that call. So if I can ask Kathy Moreland and Carl Van Newkirk to join me. Jed, would you join me as well? Thank you. Thank you. Since 1994, the Arlington Education and Employment Program has been promoting self-sufficiency and community belonging for new immigrants in community-based and neighborhood-centered educational programs and services. A component of REAP, as I believe you call it, is an outreach ESL program, which provides free drop-in classes to neighborhood residents. And there's a team of 40 to 45 volunteers that are donating over 50 hours a week to teach ESL instruction. And just this year, these volunteers have donated over 2,500 hours already. And so today, Kathy and Carl, on behalf of the President of the United States and the President's Council on Service and Civic Participation, I present you and your fellow volunteers with the President's Volunteer Service Award, Gold Level. Thank you.
Congratulations. Awesome. Thank you. Well, for our final remarks, we have a very special guest. And I'm not going to try to tell any of the story because that would be stealing someone else's thunder. But Ms. Zarhuna Nouri is someone who is among us as someone who has come to this nation as an immigrant. And she has a remarkable story. I'd like to call her forward, as well as, are you going to come up, Nayla? All right. Nayla Alam is a friend and partner to her in this journey that they've walked together. And so welcome very much, and I look forward to hearing your story in person.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. My name is Zarhuna Nouri. I'm from Afghanistan. I like to share my story. I'm here today, but express care. During the Soviet Union war, I was 4 years old. And my family came to Pakistan. My family came to Pakistan, and Pakistan provided me a shelter. In 2004, I came to Virginia. In 2004, I came to Virginia with my 5 children. At that time, my husband is in Afghanistan. That's too difficult for me, the new country and different culture. I find a job in a 7-Eleven, a night shift. One day, the 3 robbers came and hit me. And my spinal cord, I'm for several days in a hospital. After that, I went to Adam Center Mosque. I see the booth of Express Care. I see the booth of Express Care, and shyly I went to meet Sister Naila and Sister Yasmin. I told him my story and my life. Express Care also provide me hot meal and deliver my house and pay my bill, buy the clothes for my children. After that, the Naila Alam became like my sister. In 2006, I joined the personal care and nursing system. The 2006, I joined the personal care, but
It was funded by the Department of Labor.
Funded by the Department of Labor. That training helped me to find a job and take care of myself and my children. Now I'm working and the help people and sick people. I tell one more thing. I'm working night shift. I don't have a time for me to study for my citizenship. Then next Monday, and my test is in citizenship and immigration. I have 5 children. I'm working night shift. I hope so. I'm gonna be fast. And I failed one time. I'm gonna be fast in that time. And my story, and thank you, of President Bush. Thank you, of White House, and thank you, faith-based community office, and Mrs. John, Jill, sorry. And also, I'm speaking 5 languages, but English is too difficult for me. I'm sorry. Khuda Hafiz, and thank you. God bless all America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, I don't think there's too much more we should say. I think all of us feel the strength of what all of this is about that we've been talking about, that government has a vital role in these situations that we've been talking about, and yet government, it can't pull your socks up. And, I think of if every single one of us was a government official in this room, and with all due respect to those of us who work in government, I think we could do a lot of good things, but I doubt we would think of the idea of harvesting citrus as a central doorway into aiding new immigrants there in the Southeast, or how vital home health care can be in helping new immigrants in Northern Virginia, or just all of the other things, the importance of Sharia-compliant loans up in Maine. Those are things that come from the community up. And so it's certainly an honor for the U.S. government to partner with these organizations, sometimes financially, sometimes in other ways. But ultimately, that work is done. The transformation happens one heart, one life at a time at the community level. And so we're so thankful to be in it with you. We hope today has been not only hope-waking, but practical, that some of these models that you've learned about, some of the ideas that have flowed from this time will see echo within your own work in different parts of the country over the years to come. So with that, thank you very much, and I just wish you the very best in your ongoing mission.